Welcome everyone. I think we can start. If in case there are technical issue, the technical team, please let me know if I have to stop or start again. My name is Matteo Merzagora. I work in Paris in an association for science and society, and I'm convening this high-level roundtable and an interactive workshop that will follow on science and education. So science and education is the broad topic that we're going to address, and we want to explore how certain aspects which relates to innovation and to collaboration can help future policies about science education. We know that it is not a matter of if educational system and if education should change. Education must change if it wants to remain adapted to a changing environment. The question is how, in which direction. And the starting point, which also originated this roundtable, I remember, organized by the Lisbon Council and the Excite Network, is a project, the SAL School as Living Lab project, that tries to adopt one approach to address the issue of how innovation and collaboration can help innovate education. And it does it through testing if the Living Lab approach and all the culture of open innovation can be used to develop new approaches to what is called now open schooling. The session will, this hour and a half that we have, will be organized as follow. I first ask Pavlos Kouroulis, who is the coordinator of the SAL project, to introduce in 5 minutes what are the basic lines of this project. Then we have 3 high-level speakers that I will introduce later. Each one will address us his or her thinking on the topic. We have about 20 minutes then, if we are able to respect the timing, for an open discussion. This can happen in 2 ways. Either you can ask your question on the chat of the WebEx platform, or you can ask, always in the chat, to join in and to ask your question or make your comments directly on screen. In that case, we will open the possibility for you to speak. After that, the idea is to have about half an hour for a short, more interactive session in which we can contribute to explore the potential and the gaps and the needs of policies for future education. So I guess that's it for now. I hope everything is clear. And so the first will be Pavlos to introduce us to this open schooling project called School as Living Lab in about 5 minutes, so we are able to respect the timing. Pavlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matteo. Good morning to everyone. I'm very happy to be here and very honored to be able to welcome you to this roundtable on behalf of the SAL consortium. And I'll start immediately sharing a very short presentation to talk to you through the most important aspects of our project, which is organizing this event. So I hope you can see my screen.
Looks perfect.
Excellent. So SAL stands for Schools as Living Labs, and this is a way to support open schooling and science education. Maybe in and out of school would be an easy way to explain it, but I'll go in greater detail in what SAL really is about. First of all, we are a European project funded by the European Commission in the framework of Horizon 2020. One of those European projects on open schools and science education. Our consortium comes from 12 countries. We are 13 partner organizations, a very wide spectrum of stakeholders coming together: schools, universities, research centers, science centers and communicators, third sector organizations, enterprises. And since September 2020, we have been working on how to introduce an innovative approach to science education, namely the Living Lab concept and methodology. If I need to say just 4 words about SAL, I would say open schools and living labs. SAL is about open schools, which we conceive together with the European Commission, as schools which, in cooperation with other stakeholders, become agents of community well-being by creating new partnerships in their local communities. We promote this interest of Europe in integrating the concept of open schooling and science education, and we're building on previous work on an existing impactful framework for open schooling, the OSOS, the Open Schools for Open Societies framework. On the other hand, living labs are not an education concept. It was not born in the world of education. Living labs are conceived as user-centered open innovation ecosystems. They are based on systematic user co-creation, and they integrate research and innovation processes in real-life communities. SAL brings this powerful concept and methodology into the landscape of open schooling efforts. What is an open school then? In fewer words, the very important aspects. It's part of a wider system of social actors in a neighborhood or an area. We are working very much on the local level, in the local context. The open school is open to the society. It is an agent of community well-being, as I said earlier. It's working together with people and organization within its local setting. And the open school is the whole school community. It includes educators, other staff, students, but also students and teachers' families. A living lab, on the other hand, is all about collaboration. Collaboration among different social actors. They all wish to deal together with a problem or issue, and this problem or issue is important to each one of them. Co-creation is in the heart of the living lab approach, co-creation of ideas in order to solve the problem or issue. After exploring it, a critical step for us in SAL is to see the development of basic elements of this solution in a fast and economical way, prototyping and testing the solution with the stakeholders to get feedback and improve it. We're talking then about some quite innovative school projects, living lab school projects, whereby school communities develop the open schooling approach in practice by applying the methodology of living labs with students' active initiative and participation. So the students are real actors, agents within the living lab project. They're engaged in innovative educational living lab activities, co-creating solutions to problems, as I said, but these are real problems from students' real life experiences, making learning really relevant to them. This involves a strong synergy of the school with the local community. We call them social actors or stakeholders. And all those activities are naturally cross-curricular, interdisciplinary, and very much practice-oriented. An important thing not to forget about SAL is that currently we're working on the thematic focus of the food system, and all its dimensions are included, from the production, distribution, consumption, up to the disposal of food. All issues linked to health, economy, environment are possible topics of school living lab projects. Very quickly, what we do in SAL, our approach is we bring together the stakeholders, we co-construct the living lab based open schooling methodology. We closely study living lab based open schooling practices in schools in real life settings. And on this background, based on the findings and experience gained from through this process, we prepare the ground for sustainable activities. Part of that is policy-oriented interventions, and this roundtable today is one of those interventions. We are developing a network of schools in many countries, in 10 countries in Europe. We have promised to bring together more than 400 schools, more than 1,000 teachers, more than 10,000 students who will be developing living lab projects. This network is rapidly being developed. We have just spent the first preparatory year of the project, and right now we are entering the phase of implementation in many, many school environments across Europe. Living labs in pictures are really lively living labs, a lot of activity, student agency, and I hope I didn't take much time. I'll be happy to give more information. I'm looking forward to the discussion that will develop today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pavlos, for this introduction. Very clear. I hope the main idea are now on the table. And in order to discuss them, we have three very complementary and very interesting point of view. Before giving the floor to each one of you, I would like to make a fast round in order to know who we have around the screen. And so if you can, just in 1 minute, present your work and who you are. The first one I'd like to invite in is Cassie Hague. You work at OECD. What is your role there? Cassie?
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you, Matteo. I do indeed work at the OECD, and thank you for the invitation to be a part of this roundtable. I'm delighted to be here. So I'm an analyst in the Centre for Educational Research and Innovation at the OECD. And I work on a project that collaborates with schools and practitioners to develop approaches to developing creativity and critical thinking across the curriculum and across different countries.
Thank you very much, Cassie. We look forward for this perspective. Another one is the one of Tuija Hirvikoski from Finland and from Laura University, also involved in education and in Living Lab. Tuija, what's your focus of interest?
Thank you. Actually, in this session, I have two hats. The first one, obviously, is my own university, Laura, which is certainly one of the pioneers in the field of applying living labs and also developing pedagogical models, how to benefit from that. But my second hat, more importantly from the side of this session, is that I'm one of the founding members of European Network of Living Labs and former president. I also realized that our current president, Evdokimos Konstantinis, is participating this session as well. So we will be happy to collaborate with all of you with this project after the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuija. And last, Michael Teutsch, your perspective is from the European Commission. Can you tell us briefly with which role and which focus you work on?
Yeah, thanks, Matteo, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I'm Michael Teutsch, European Commission. I'm head of unit for schools and multilingualism in the Commission. So on schools, what do? We have policy collaboration with member states and stakeholders, basically on everything, starting from early school leaving, key competences development, teacher education, also quality early childhood education, and now education for environmental sustainability, all issues which are topical to exchange of good practices with countries and try to support countries in making reforms happen. This is exchange of good practice. The other big strand is, of course, our Erasmus Plus program, where in the team we manage the schools, vocational education and training and adult learning part. Because the program, of course, we have lots of activities when it comes to mobility, but of course we have many projects also exchanging good practices. So that's second type of activity where we try to support learners, teachers, member states. And thirdly, we have a number of platforms. I mean, the School Education Gateway is something that people can go to and to also discover good practice in what happens in countries in research in order to innovate education, which is the topic also of today. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. So I hope the appetite for listening and for thinking is now set. And remember, you can ask already. I mean, even during the different speakers' intervention, you can ask your question in the chat, and we will open them after we have heard everyone. If we follow the order that was announced, Cassie Hague is the first to speak, and so for about 10 minutes, please give us your thinking from the OECD perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Matteo. I'll try my best to stick to time. So as I said, I work on this project that collaborates with networks of schools and teachers across primary, secondary and tertiary education and in different countries. So today what I'd like to do is very briefly tell you a little bit about what we've learned from that project about innovating in science classrooms, and also reflect briefly on what we've learned about taking innovation at the individual classroom level and using it to inform and support change at the system level. So the project is an international action research project around innovation in education. And the intervention part of the primary and secondary phase of the project was completed in 2019. And we're now concentrating on the higher education space, but also working on kind of joining up policy approaches across all levels of education. But I'm going to focus on the primary and secondary strand, and that involved 11 countries and about 320 schools, 800 teachers and 20,000 students. So professional development was provided at the national level for teachers, and then our teachers developed and trialled teaching and assessment practices with the aim of supporting students' creative and critical thinking as part of the development of their subject knowledge. And we started the process by defining a common language, really. So we developed rubrics to define what creativity and critical thinking looked like in particular subjects. So teachers had previously told us that creativity and critical thinking were very important to them, but that they weren't always sure what that would look like in their own classroom, integrated with their own subjects. So we developed this kind of common language, and that was really important to support collaboration, ensure that everyone understood what the innovation was trying to achieve. So I won't talk this through, but you can see that it breaks down creativity and critical thinking under these 4 sub-dimensions of inquiring, imagining, doing, and reflecting. We also wanted to provide really concrete examples of how practitioners could build creativity and critical thinking into their subject teaching, particularly in science, as I'm focusing on today. So we created a number, about 80 exemplar lesson plans. And the idea was that practitioners could use those as inspiration and build versions that were suitable for their specific curriculum and context. So this wasn't about off the peg innovation. It was about providing examples that were really grounded and born out of the individual experiences and context of practitioners, and allowing other practitioners to create their own resources and approaches that fit their own circumstances and needs. And that was really important in terms of respecting teacher knowledge and bringing practitioners along with us as the kind of fundamental stakeholders in these changes. So teachers used some of the methods on this slide and many others, and we also provided design criteria for them to guide them in developing lessons that integrate creativity and critical thinking into science teaching. And some of the things that they asked students to do included building models of ecosystems or DNA, discussing the relative merits of different methods of power production, discussing the relevance of science to everyday news articles, discussing the merits of different ways of representing cells or different taxonomies of living creatures, engaging students in driving questions. So for example, about why we feel colder when we're wet. And we wanted to build reach so that more and more practitioners could think about integrating creativity and critical thinking into their teaching. So we're building an app that will make our bank of pedagogical resources, so that's the rubrics, the courses, student examples of student work and lots of other materials. So that's going to make those materials directly available to teachers for free, obviously. And we hope to kind of build some momentum around that. And we also wanted to build in monitoring and evaluation systems. So we developed instruments that could be used to show how both teachers and students' kind of perceptions of creativity and critical thinking and their ability to identify creativity and critical thinking in particular subjects developed as a result of their involvement in the project. And we want to make those publicly available at some point. And they were also very helpful in identifying and addressing any equity issues that might arise in the course of the innovations. So, for example, that we saw throughout the project that girls progressed much more with their creativity and critical thinking as a result of the interventions in all subjects except for STEM, which obviously mirrors with some of the what we know from the research about girls in STEM. We wanted also to enable international exchange and peer learning. So we not only met as a network throughout the project, but we also developed a series of public webinars, which are ongoing and which draw lessons from the project to inform countries' attempts to move from idea to implementation in the implementation of some of these skills. And we most recently had one on Ireland in May of this year. So in terms of lessons about successful innovation in science and lessons about using that to inform institutional and system level changes, I think we've learnt the importance of building examples from the ground up. So starting by getting practitioners on board and making sure sufficient resources and training are available for them. And then building this kind of common understanding and a common agenda so that everyone understands what we're talking about and has a joint vocabulary to discuss it and measure it. And that also involved creating toolkits of practical resources and instruments to help all stakeholders both implement and measure changes in their own contexts. And I think on the policy level, what we've really seen is the importance of cooperation across the system. So yes, these innovations started in individual classrooms and individual schools, but what was really important to create system level change, and we particularly saw that in the case of Ireland, for example, was getting the inspectorate involved, getting the curriculum agencies involved, getting the teacher training agencies involved, and really building a common agenda across these different areas of the system, supported by concrete initiatives by those different bodies. Also, as I said, it was important to learn internationally. There's so many interesting things happening on the ground in individual schools and individual cities, and it's important to provide a platform for discussing and learning from those experiences. And I think these sorts of roundtable events are really important for that kind of reason. I think we also looked at it as very much a long-term picture. So these kinds of changes don't happen overnight. The changes in the classroom can be quite, in an individual classroom, can be quite quick, but in terms of building system-wide lessons from that, that takes time. And, you know, so we have people still working really hard at building that into policy at national levels, even several years after the end of the implementation of this project. So beyond when people are paying attention and beyond when it, you know, through changes of ministers and education, people that are really still committed to the agenda of making changes at the system level. And I just wanted to leave you really with this slide, which comes from our Teaching and Learning International Survey. It hasn't come out that well, but this is teachers' views on their colleagues' attitudes towards innovation. And so you can see that teachers are open to innovation, although that might be to different levels across different countries. You see really quite large percentages of teachers across the board thinking that that they agree or strongly agree that most teachers in the school are open to innovation. So I think that with the right support and structure, I think there's lots of possibility to transform science teaching in European countries. I'm really looking forward to our discussion and to hearing more about learning labs, and very open to kind of collaboration in the future. So I think that's all I wanted to say for now, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cassie. I think you raised several points that will need to be discussed later, the importance of cooperation from a policy point of view. I'm seeing also things that are underlined in the chat, and this example of this fact of building things from ground up. We will go into full question and discussion later. I just have one quick question that I think we can ask now. Phil Smith is asking how much a barrier was a language for creating this common toolkit. OECD is a very international structure. I guess you cannot do things in all the language of the OECD countries. How much is a language as a barrier in? Cassie cannot speak anymore. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I think I managed to unmute myself. Yeah. So yeah, just to say that the all of the individual teachers worked in their own languages and then sent their materials to us for translation. And then in terms of building the rubrics, they were built in English and in French. And then they were sent back to the teachers and they translated those into their own languages. So yes, of course, there was some need to speak in English or in French, especially in our network meetings, but we tried as much as possible to embed this practice in the individual languages of the countries that we were working in.
Thank you very much. Next is Professor Tuija, who, as she said at the beginning, has two hats from which she can speak. So I don't know which one you will wear first, but in any case, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you for showing the slides as well. I will use as my reference my background from Finland. As you know, based on the OECD evaluations, particularly the PISA evaluations, we managed to create quite a successful society regarding to education. I would also claim that the way how we have been developing technological and science education has had a very important role in creating the whole society. So not only speaking about school learning in universities, but also a joint learning process in the whole society. And actually this brings me back to my second hat, Enol. And this is a policy discussion, so it's important to realize that the Helsinki Manifesto was the starting point for creation of European Network of Living Labs. And that was discussion between Finnish Prime Minister and the colleagues in European Commission during Finnish presidency of European Union. And already in early 2000, we were heavily collaborating, all the schools, higher education institutions, Nokia representing many of the companies, SMEs and cities. And that's how the society as a whole was operating as a living laboratory, and also trying to convince also European politicians about the need of open innovation. Currently, if you would like to take a look at the links, you can find very interesting examples from the city of Helsinki, how currently the schools operate as living laboratories. And certainly in SAL project, you have similar and maybe better examples, but because this is what I know, so I will rely on my own experience. Next slide, please. As a matter of fact, while you are changing the slide, so I would also like to emphasize that using the Living Lab approach 30 years ago, Laurea University of Applied Sciences started to develop a pedagogical model, which we call learning by developing. It was intuitively something what we currently call open innovation, open school, but also open science. So we were integrating our students to our research and development activities. And guess what happened? In a couple of years, we became the most awarded university of applied sciences in Finland. And for the 5-6 years currently, so we have been the most attractive university in Finland, including scientific universities. Why? Because the students found out that this is a very motivating way to get the academic skills and also professional skills that they need. Okay, my first policy recommendation, actually Helsinki 1917 was the year when my father was born. And look at the picture. We were the developing country of Europe, and currently it's the opposite. And that's why the policymakers have an extremely important role. As I mentioned earlier, the whole country, your city, your school can operate as a co-creation platform or a living laboratory. So multi-stakeholder collaboration is something that the policymakers can facilitate. And it has to be orchestrated collaboration. I will come back to the question of orchestration later on. Promote also joint learning and education. And in the case of Finland, the secret was extremely good teachers' education. You can't have anything to do with kids in this country if you don't hold minimum master's degree. Also, inclusiveness is extremely important. Consider girls, consider immigrants, consider all kinds of citizens, and also apply citizen science as your approach. And then, of course, openness, that's the key word. Open science, open innovation, open learning, and equality. Because if we don't consider the whole society as a system, we will fail. So no matter how much we teach mathematics, science to the students, the society will not be in position to create the transformation which will benefit all the citizens. Okay, next one, please. In one of my research projects, Co-Creation Orchestration, we have been studying several Finnish living labs and innovation ecosystems. And I would heavily or warmly, I would like to recommend the policymakers not only to focus on the formal side of organization, look at the informal side of organization, because trust is the key driver of learning, innovation, and collaboration. And that is where the long-term collaboration between the different stakeholders creates the trust. So actually it's a bit paradoxical. If you don't apply the living lab approach, you will not be in position to create the trust. And if you don't have the trust, it will be difficult to create the co-creation processes. But you have to get over that. And in that case, I would say that the funding organizations, the policymakers, they create the framework within which the collaboration will be possible. Here we have also one paradox. I will not have much time to explain it, but really freedom is important, but then at the same time we need to monitor the systems, and if the monitoring system it hasn't been created jointly, it will be difficult. Next slide, please. We jumped over one, but it doesn't matter. So the role of cities, for example, in the case of Finland, they are taking several various roles in order to facilitate and orchestrate this transformation. So remember that the policymakers in local and regional level, they have to be brave and they have to understand what is their role in all of this. Next one, please. An example, a couple of maybe 5-6 years ago, we created for the city of Espoo a systematic way how they can transform their kindergartens, primary schools, vocational education institutions into living labs. And it was really important to realize that we need systematic methods, we need rules, and we need protocols. And that's how we can accelerate joint co-creation and experimentation among schools and companies, involving the significant others, the students, the teachers, and putting the student into the center of everything, referring to the fact that their needs to learn is what we are serving. We are not serving the companies or the cities, we are serving the students. Next one, please. Okay, I will just quickly show how we do that at Laurea University. As I said, this has been like the secret weapon of my university. Actually, we had in Finnish policy at the time when Laurea was founded, the policy was based on proximity, referring to the fact that the power should be where the teachers, the professors deal with their students and the reality of the society. And that's how we have had relatively useful autonomy in designing the way how we are organizing our educational and research processes. And that is when we started to implement the open innovation approach. The first projects were together with Nokia developing the mobile phone technologies. And you can imagine that this was very interesting for the students. The students who previously were not at all keen on mathematics or technology, it turned completely because they were involved to the collaboration in the various innovation phases, from challenge definition to the launch of the actual product. Next one, please. It calls for a pedagogical innovativeness from the teachers to be able to convert the top-down teaching to bottom-up phenomenon-driven or problem-driven learning. And during the past 3 decades, there has been very different types of activities where, first of all, the university has been orchestrating different type of collaborative learning processes together with companies and other stakeholders. So we have created living labs, maker spaces, fab lab, operations. We have been testing with our students different solutions, technological solutions for the companies. We have been promoting the concept of city as a living lab, covering all the innovation phases. And then our students created something what is called technology library and a showroom, bringing the new technological devices, for example, to elderly people, explaining how they operate and motivating them to explain for the others about what are the benefits of science and technology. And then standardization and landing platforms in various other countries is something that we are working on currently with some of the Horizon 2020 projects. Next one, please. I think I'm overtaking my time.
Yes, you are about.
We are ending.
Thank
Yeah, thank you.
No, please. You can develop your conclusion.
No, it's my encouragement would be that the decision makers should have the courage to trust the teachers, and the teachers should have the courage to trust their students. And that is how you create the positive circle where motivation is increasing. Students find out new ways how why they need more information, why they need to understand better different methods and so forth. And in the long run, I believe that this will create a completely new generation of open science-oriented citizen scientists to Europe. And that is how the whole continent, pan-European development will take place, similarly as Finland jumped from developing country to the technology leading country. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tuija, for this also very clear and strong message. Now, the last speaker is Michael Teutsch. Sorry if my pronunciation is not the right one. From the European Commission point of view this time.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you so much also to the other speakers for the input, because the issue I see a lot is that, for me, the main question is that what we've been discussing today, I mean, the challenges are very clear, the solutions are very clear, but what makes it that so little of all of this is actually happening? Because I think it was quite interesting to see also the slide here from the Cassie from the OECD, where they've asked teachers. I mean, the teachers themselves said they believe that their colleagues are very innovative. Just to be polemic, you could ask whether the students or the parents or the policymakers would agree with the statements. But okay, let's leave that open. But I think how comes if these solutions that are here are being discussed are so difficult to get them done across Europe? Because across Europe, we have big challenges. We still know, I mean, from the OECD again, that if we look at science education, that we still have about 1 out of 5 students who are really nowhere when it comes also in science competences in the 15-year-olds from the PISA studies. We know that also among the good performers, we have many youngsters who are actually interested in science and then don't go into science professions, for example. I mean, particular professions in particular. And so also for the high performers, we have some issues. And then we're working on those, and I think what I would also like to say, the examples that Pavlos has explained at the start in terms of the solutions that are there in terms of that can be brought to make science, the learning more effective in terms of competence acquirement, but also to make it more attractive for students. It's actually not only a science-related issues, because I mean, if you look at those, at least when I look at our own European Union policy documents, everything that Pavlos has said, we would actually put it for any subject that is sort of good education. It's sort of extremely, I would subscribe to anything you've said, but actually it's really about good teaching in the 21st century, what you say. I mean, we would, if I look at our own documents, for example, we have a council recommendation on key competence for lifelong learning, where science is one part, but also if we look at languages, if we look at entrepreneurship, citizenship, education, in terms of the solutions to be brought, it's always the issues that we've highlighted for all issues which apply to science, as well as they apply to other competences as well. It's really about more collaborative teaching methods. It's about collaboration between teachers. It's about reaching out to society, working together to innovate, to have ideas. It's about and an important point also about making assessment. Maybe that's an issue which very often is a bit of an obstacle to the whole discussion, because our experience from projects and discussion is very often that's these more innovative methods. It's all fine, but if they are not sort of translated also in more interesting sort of assessment methods, where these competence for innovation also get the positive results in terms of student assessments and teacher professional assessment, perhaps, that is not going to help innovation either. That's something very often. So we have, what was interesting when we discussed this key competences recommendation in 2018, we did an update. It had been around for quite a while, but we shifted the focus a bit, or we completed it, from not only looking at the what, so which competences, language teaching, mathematics, science, citizenship, entrepreneurship, so a full spectrum of key competences, but we also put quite some emphasis on teacher education, assessment, and new learning methods. And that's also a bit what we have in your Living Labs project, that's why it's a really good one. And I sometimes wonder why is so little of this actually happening. I mean, if you see it, I mean, I mean, another topic we've seen, for example, now, let's look at the last 1.5 years. Another project we're working on at the moment, I mean, it's really to see, we've had a major challenge for education systems over the last 1.5 years with lots of distance learning and emergency remote teaching. And what we saw there is that fantastic innovation, creativity by a number of schools, a number of teachers and some countries, and really trying to sort of survive during the people, but also maybe rethink the way you work. And some others, I mean, it's complete disaster. I mean, you have all challenges that we had before in terms of social inclusion, in terms of really competences, development, have actually been further aggravated. So you could see really maybe this crisis has actually also shown, I mean, maybe accentuated the gap between those who were able to innovate in the crisis situation and those who were not. We're currently discussing this with the EU member states. With the Commission side, we have proposed a Council recommendation on blended learning, where we hope, it was proposed just on the 5th of August this year, with the intention is blended learning being sort of a mixture between in-classroom and out-of-classroom learning, a mixture between digital and non-digital learning, a mixture actually between learning methods. What do you do at home? What do you do in the classroom? But why do you not go to a museum? What about collaborating with a company, citizens, with stakeholders? We're trying to promote this. We currently have an interesting discussion with countries on actually what are the points that we can retain even after the crisis. We promoted this recommendation to say, okay, this was terrible, but please, member states, look at what has done, look at what was difficult, but please don't just pretend everything was perfect 2 years ago and just go back to that. Maybe there are a few things that you've learned now in terms of rethinking learning methods that we would like to keep also in the future. We're currently discussing this. And the interesting examples are exactly those that Pavlos has presented to us. I mean, just look at the competence-based outputs, look at what you collaborate with teachers, look at how you work with museums. Just 2 other examples where these issues are discussed in the European Union context. At the moment, we had just running 2 open public consultations on initiatives that are come. One is on sustainability education, so education for environmental sustainability, part of the Green Deal in the European Union, where, of course, all the feedback we received so far, the deadline for consultations was last week. Very much, again, also what has been said here in the Living Lab possibilities to say, well, collaborate in the teams, collaborate with the outside stakeholders, with the world, in order to get innovation in teaching. And actually the same also for anything which is sort of the more, how do we make learning more attractive for those who are disadvantaged in education, either socioeconomically disadvantaged, or simply how do we get those 20% low performers into the systems and more integrated, where we have big challenges, maybe even more now. Again, the same thing. So I sometimes wonder, I mean, for me, the glass is a bit sometimes half full, sometimes it's half empty. And because we have fantastic examples like Tuija was presenting for us from Finland, who've actually managed to have it at a system level. We have countries where we have fantastic schools, but an absolute disaster system. And the issue is really how to get this mainstreamed. I think the Irish example is a good one that was mentioned, I think, by I think who mentioned it was Cassie, I think, said it, because we have there a fantastic inspectorate who's really pushing the things also in terms of, I mean, getting students involved at pre-primary level. In Ireland, they've developed questionnaires for 5-year-old children to give feedback on their teachers, to understand how schools are working. I mean, that's really a great example. And I think that's where we have to go, because we know, but I mean, to my taste, there's really much too little innovation still in school. We have fantastic teachers. We have also some teachers who are a bit reticent, how to say, more resistant to change, who just like to be in the classroom on themselves and don't want to be bothered by innovation. So how do we get everybody on board? It's the same in the Commission. I'm not blaming the teachers. I also here have colleagues who are more happy to be challenged and others not. So that's a big thing ahead, and we try from our side to use the learning, our Erasmus programs, the Horizon program that you are working into to actually disseminate good information. I'm quite happy also to see the figures that what Pavlos mentioned is quite a nice network, a big network. And we hope that with big networks like this, with e-twinning that we have, we can make the good messages and the solutions heard across Europe, so that's picked up. I'll stop here. Thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Michael, too. Now, there are a lot of issues on the floor. I open up for questions, whether they are in the chat, if you want to ask specific questions, or if you want to make more elaborated and personal type of intervention, you can ask in the chat to take the floor, and your microphone will magically be opened by the people that are in charge of the technical issues. So I invite you to contribute to the discussion with the question to the speakers, and we have about 10 minutes. We have taken some delay, but not so much. So I thank you everyone for keeping the timing. If I see no question, I have quite a general one, but okay. We thank you, Christy. Would you like to just ask this question directly on the floor? Maybe we can give the microphone to Christy Klasmagi. If you wish to pose your question directly, since it's, I think, quite an elaborated one. Is this possible?
I've sent a request to Christy to unmute.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think I'm very happy I'm here today. I'm the new vice rector for education and innovation at Tallinn University in Estonia. So I've been in my role for 1 month, and that just this broadcast just happened on my way, and I'm very happy I'm here. What Tuija shared about the orchestrated multi-stakeholder collaboration, like this is something that I'm really dreaming would happen in the university here. So I'm really moved by the last speaker's question, like why don't we see more innovation in schools? And I think it really applies to universities as well. So my question is actually to Tuija, just coming from experience and from her research, like what's stopping us? Like what are the obstacles? And it's my personal interest too, because this is something that I would dream to happen in Estonia. So what would guide me is my question. So what would help me, and what are the obstacles to be aware of maybe?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. I think Tuija is able to answer from.
Okay, thank you for the question, and I think it's a very complex question, and particularly because we are currently, all of us, we would like to see that education, science, universities will serve societies. And that has created an enormous transformation where we are cutting down the autonomy of teachers, professionals, science. To a certain extent, it's understandable because, for example, in Finland, all my costs are paid by fellow citizens. So I'm only using tax money when I'm doing whatever I'm doing. So they have the right to demand. But then at the same time, we have to understand that there are certain processes which will take decades to mature. And who has the knowledge what will be needed in the future decades? So to a certain extent, I think if we are cutting too much the autonomy of educators, we will also dismotivate the educational institution. They will stop developing themselves because someone else is providing top-down demands and claiming to do things. I had the luxury of experiencing the Finnish era when the freedom within framework was the policy driver. So really empowering the educational institutions, research institutions, teachers, as I mentioned earlier. But this is little by little changing now. And as I mentioned earlier, there is a paradox between this question that we need to monitor and we need to provide the freedom. I assume that in longer run, by co-creating the evaluation and monitoring processes together with the different stakeholders in society, that will be the solution. So it's not either or, it's both and. But really, if you consider your own learning, did you ever learn anything during your life when someone was pushing you to study or to acquire knowledge? I would claim that at least I didn't. I always understood that my students, myself, the learning was based on internal motivation. And that is what we have to cherish. Complex.
Thank you very much, Tuija. I don't know if there are more questions. I do have one for Michael, because it seems like most of the intervention revolve around the thought on how to transform a nice local innovation, individual teachers that do beautiful things, or in schools, or into a more systemic system. My question is, do you have or do you dream of some way to monitor, to assess which one of the experimentation that, in particular those that the Commission is funding right now, are able to go to the systemic level and which one are not, so that we can also learn what are the key elements that will allow to plan ahead, something that is prepared for going at systemic way. Is there a way to do that, or is it just a dream?
No, it's a very good question. I mean, we're trying, our work to also look at good practices, innovation as they happen at school level. But of course, we also try to see which of the systems, if we look at longer term perspectives, are able to evolve positively. And we see it sometimes in terms of, if we see some countries, we work a lot there with the colleagues from the OECD. If we look at the more long-term perspective, countries which have developed positively, how comes that this has happened? But then we also do monitoring of policies on a yearly basis. We have a publication which is called the Education and Training Monitor, where we sort of look at what's happening in Europe on a yearly basis on some topics. We look at it from a European cross-country perspective, but we also have country chapters where we are once every year, which we analyze how has policy making developed over the years, and how has the policy development also hopefully led to certain development at system level. And there we try really also to identify countries and also the policies they pursued, which have been successful in pushing for innovation in certain areas, always with the idea, okay, if let's say Finland, Estonia are able to do it, why shouldn't another country, or let's say Spain or whoever else, or Portugal, why shouldn't another country pick it up? I mean, that's the whole added value of European cooperation, and that's why we have our discussions. And if you want to look at examples, this Education Training Monitor could be an interesting one, together with our websites, with the Gateway School Education Gateway, where we have sort of more individual examples which are school-based.
Thank you very much. We are about at the end, but I will be happy if our three speakers, if you have a one sentence key elements that you want to bring to the floor, and then maybe we can go to Francesco Mureddu, who is going to introduce the last part of this talk. Would you feel comfortable in addressing us a key message from each of you, and maybe starting with Cassie?
Well, we've discussed so much. I mean, I think the key point that's standing out to me above all is this kind of long-term collaboration across the system, including kind of informal collaboration, co-creation of monitoring standards, learning from those countries that are more successful at getting this done. I think the question of why it's so difficult to get this done over Europe as Michael, sorry, said, is a really important one. And if we look at the challenges, you know, we were just looking at some data on this yesterday, finding that surprise, surprise, time was the main challenge that people had in terms of implementing innovation. So looking at those challenges and trying to work out how to address them.
Great. Tuija?
I think the key question is openness. It's really opening up the schools, but it's also about open science and open innovation and learning from each other, and not only looking at the successful schools and countries, but also trying to find out ways how different type of cities and countries and schools in Europe can collaborate, because everyone will learn about themselves when they are collaborating with the problems the other countries have. At least that was the case we have been developing our system. So pan-European collaboration, absolutely demanded.
I guess the final word of Michael would probably be not very different from this one.
No, exactly. Tuija has just taken what I wanted to say. My keyword was really the collaboration. I mean, the collaboration in schools, the collaboration between schools and outside stakeholders, be it municipalities, social services, and of course more central services like the inspectorate. And that's, for me, the key thing to go ahead in order to get the innovation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the three speakers, and thank you, Pavlos, for the introduction. Now the word is to Francesco Mureddu, because in the SAL project, the idea is to test all the different approaches to make School as Living Lab work, but also to translate into advices for policy making. This is the roadmap. We will get into an interactive session, but Francesco can introduce the topic now.
Thank you, Matteo. Thanks to all the speakers. So basically, one of the core output of the SAL project will be a policy roadmap to European policies for Living Lab-based open schooling. The roadmap preparation, elaboration is starting now, and will basically last until the end of the project in August 2023. So the idea for the roadmap is to put forward a set of policy recommendations that should be followed in order to basically normalize the use of Living Labs methodology in education and complemented with an open schooling framework. And there are basically three main steps in elaborating the roadmap. One is the identification of the policy gaps that hinder the uptake and implementation of Living Labs-based open schooling. The second one is the elaboration of a set of future policy challenges and implementation scenario related to Living Labs-based open schooling. And the final one is the definition of a set of practical policy directions and recommendations. So basically, the roadmap will tackle issues like what are the major policy gaps and challenges that have to be considered and addressed for normalizing the implementation of Living Lab-based open schooling. What kind of instruments and incentives are necessary to tackle those challenges? What are the anticipated impacts of those challenges? And what are the broad recommendations for policymakers? Let me show you the tool that we normally use at the Lisbon Council to co-create roadmaps. This tool is called Making Speech Talk, and is a proprietary tool of the Lisbon Council. And we have been using this tool to develop roadmaps for several years at the moment, roadmaps, and also to develop different kinds of policy recommendations for different domains, and also indicators for impact assessment in different domains. Basically, the idea for us is that we will put content in the tool, and so online, and then people will be able to comment, to add comments in let's say almost line by line. In this way, people will be able to contribute to the development of the roadmap, and we will also able to steer the roadmap a little towards what they think it should be. And the idea is also to, apart from co-creating the roadmap with relevant stakeholders, the idea is also to involve the stakeholders that have commented the most, that have the most interest in the development of the roadmap, also in elaborating academic articles or other kind of contents. So now, please, Matteo, you have the floor.
Yes.
For the co-creation.
Thank you, Francesco, for this introduction. The idea, we have only 20 minutes. We know that, as we have stated several times, real co-creation and real collaboration takes time, but also this time is made of small steps. And so the idea is to do a quick exercise of identifying main policy needs for implementing open schooling. I will suggest to go to the Padlet that I just put in the chat. And now if I'm able to do that, I will try to, okay, thank you very much for showing it also on the WebEx platform. So the idea in terms of what we want to do, I'd like to reintroduce the open schooling. In the Padlet, you will find the link to the roadmap, but also the basic SAL documents that there is more on the website, but these are the key ones. And you can, by double click anywhere in the board, in the Padlet, you can add a comment, your suggestion of to answer this question: what are the policy measures that should exist to foster the implementation of open schooling? If you are not familiar with the Padlet, well, it's quite simple, so you can be brave enough to try it. But if you prefer not, you can always put your comment on the chat, and I think it's going to be the Excite team that will put it on the Padlet so we can collect all input. We have 20 minutes, but my first question is, we put on the left a definition of open schooling, which is quite related to the SAL project. And maybe you want to complete it, adding a note to it, and or just criticize it because it's not a satisfactory definition of open schooling. So you can do it on the chat or by just clicking on the board. And we leave a few minutes to think in silence, and then we can go to the first question. So I don't see much activities in the chat or in the platform. Yes, that this is very good. Thank you, because it comes directly from the key messages that have been posted, that have been presented right now. So not only open to society, not only open schooling and open innovation and open science, but also open to collaboration, which is an extremely important element of it. Thank you. So we leave a few moments more to add things. As I said, you can also post in the chat. Yeah, the word trust has been mentioned. I think it was Tuija who mentioned as a keyword in all stages of this collaborative type of work, and it's good that it comes up even there. Mutual learning, listening, learning from everyone. Okay, I think the space is being taken, and I like to go to the second question. To the speakers that should have still the microphone open, please, you can also intervene orally. The others, we will ask you to ask to speak in the chat so that we can give you the floor. It is always possible, but we are too many to open up all the microphone at the same time. So thank you for enriching the definition of open schooling and its topic. In the roadmap, Francesco, you can be more specific if you want on that, but the element is to find the actual concrete policy measures that we would need to foster this implementation of open schooling. So now I will ask everyone with the same method, I see it's working, to answer to this question. What are the policy measures? Please, you can work, you can contribute mainly by keywords or short sentences. The exercise is of course limited by the space also that we have there. But yeah, that's what we can do in 15 minutes. So again, I'll stay quiet for a few minutes and leave the time for you to put either a post-it or your thinking on the chat, and we will put it on a pad on the Padlet. Thank you very much. The contributions are excellent. I think most of them are really self-explanatory, and thank you for clarity. And I think it would be interesting if Michael is willing to take a look at these propositions. I mean, there are many of them, so no worry if we are a bit lost out of it. But if you can comment on which one do you really see already that already have the lines in which they can be implemented, or which one do you see as really a big challenge to be embedded, at least at European level?
Michael is no longer with us. He had to
he
go
left.
to another. Yeah, Michael and Cassie had to go to other meetings.
Okay, sorry. I thought they were still with us. It could be have been interesting to have their comment but so then maybe we can still take advantage of Tuija presence because I can recognize that a post-it talking about orchestrated multi-stakeholder collaboration should come from her. And we have heard from Kristi Klasmägi the fact that there is a real willingness to go in that direction, but also a need to know how. So what is the policy measure that would help you, that would help this orchestrated multi-stakeholder collaboration to happen? If Tuija wants to...
Yeah. I believe we need policy measures from multiple different levels. And in order to create the circumstances for the teachers and professors, so we need the managerial level of our schools and higher education institutions. If they fail to support the professionals, nothing will happen. But then again, we all understand that those who are funding in different countries, it works in different ways. But for example, in Finland, the Ministry of Education has been in absolutely crucial role. Similarly, the national legislation, as I mentioned, the national legislation was based on the idea of proximity. So that created the framework for the long-term development. And then in order to create this joint learning process, we need the European Union level. And therefore, at least I have been very keen on collaborating in Open Science Policy Platform and other arenas where the pan-European policies are created. So all of these have to be in place, but at the end of the day, it's the people who are doing the job, the people who are working with the students, with the pupils, and that therefore that's the most crucial level.
Thank you very much. And do not hesitate to ask the floor if you want to make more comments. I see that there are quite a lot of elements that point on teachers' incentives, teacher motivation, teachers' autonomy, and also teacher leaderships, so that their role as leader can be acknowledged and recognized by the system, which is not always the case, unfortunately, now.
If you allow me.
Please.
So since we have been emphasizing a lot autonomy and trust, so we also, I think it's embedded in this idea that when the teachers are educated, they also understand their responsibilities. Similarly, as we are claiming responsible research and innovation, so it's also about responsible education. So there can't be freedom without responsibilities. So these two things go hand in hand. But again, it depends on what kind of teachers' education you have in various countries. That is certainly something that the funding systems and the legislation can also consider.
With great freedom comes great responsibility, would say a master.
Exactly.
And if you agree, in the last few minutes that we have a third question, which is about one of the topics that have been underlined by all of the speakers, I think. The aspect we called here mainstreaming, so the fact that we go behind innovative experiments and we have a systemic change going on. And the question that would help us to include it in the roadmap, and Francesco is keen of listening, I think, on this element, is what are the gaps that should be considered and addressed when the specific question is mainstream the implementation of open schooling. Here we have, again, I would give about 3-4 minutes of silence, which is a good thing to happen when we are in front of this type of meetings, and focus on this specific question. Of course, we are aware in some way it's a repetition of some of the things that you have already posted, but maybe it allows us to frame even better the issue. So a few minutes for this question. Thank you very much. I think this is very rich, and thank you very much for organizing it so neatly. And the keywords that I see emerging again is the collaboration aspects, cooperation, and how to really help this good intention to become a reality. And I see a keyword which is time, which appears very often, time in terms of the fact that whatever we do, we need to allow the time for it to happen. And this we know that it's a big problem for all policies that need to define ahead of time the time span in which things are supposed to happen, and which is so sometimes very difficult for people living, working on the floor. I don't know if in these last minutes, if Pavlos or Francesco, from the SAL point of view, if you see emerging things that are helpful for the project, or if you want to comment in general on this suggestion that have been put, of which, of course, I really thank very much everyone. They are all absolutely relevant and absolutely pertinent.
Indeed, everything is very, very relevant. It's fascinating and encouraging to see how this relates to the things we are discussing in SAL, really, while working on the concept of living labs as an education process and not just as a nice thing that is happening somewhere to be showcased, but not really implemented, in all schools. I don't want to take more time, but indeed, I see this as a start of a long, fruitful discussion rather than an end of a meeting.
Thank you, Pavlos.
Yes, I also would like to thank everybody for the very valuable input. And there is Chris Carey asking if the Padlet will remain online after the meeting. Well, actually, this is a possibility. On the other hand, we will also circulate the roadmap in commentable format so that everybody will be able to comment on directly on that. So I think that both channels can be used and can be useful for that. So yeah, I really thank everybody for the valuable input.
That's excellent. Yeah, I think I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with Padlet if we can produce a PDF directly, but I think it is worth, and also it is due to your contribution, the fact that the Padlet will be restituted. It will be online for a while in any case, maybe not for very long. So you have seen, some of you have already used it. You can also, in the few minutes that after the meeting, you can comment, you can quote and rate the proposition of each one. This will help highlight them. I see that this issue of time, resourceful thinking on a learning exploration has already 3 votes, and the support for teachers also is quite welcomed. So you can rate the notes, and you can also add comments if you want to elaborate a bit on them. It's 10:29. This is the time that we decided to devote to this reflection. My deep thank you goes to everyone at first because of these very, very valuable contributions. And of course to our 3 speakers, Cassie Hague, Tuija Hirvikoski, and Michael Teutsch, and Pavlos Kouloris, who has introduced the SAL project, and of course Francesco and all the teams of the Lisbon Council, and the team of Excite for organizing this. And I like to take the word of Chrysola Mita. Thanks for sharing your experience so generously. So goodbye, everyone.